Mick Schumacher seems to be the buzzing topic in the F1 world yet again, and this time, rumours about him replacing Logan Sargeant have only started to grow louder and louder. With the recent performance of the American in Singapore, and the fact that he's the only driver on the grid alongside Ricciardo who hasn't scored points, the future of Sargeant with Williams seemed to be a troublesome one. In an unforgiving world of the sport, this could be the opportunity that Mick has waited for so long, and if so, what effect would it have on the sport's popularity in the USA, given the fact that they have finally received their native-owned driver for the first time since 2015. If there is one thing that we can say about Sargeant's performance in 2023, it's that it's been quite subpar. I know that he's a rookie and there weren't many high expectations from him, especially considering the fact that Williams finished 10th last year in the Constructors' Championship, but with Albon showing what the car is capable of, then it was at least expected from Sargeant to circle around in the point and scrap one or two occasionally. Instead, he's the only driver on the grid that's driven all of the races and hasn't scored any points, with Lawson managing to bag in 2 points for AlphaTauri in his third race of the season. Nick de Vries has been the second one up until the 10th race of the season, Hungaroring, and the harsh environment of AlphaTauri made us wonder whether or not it's possible that this scenario will happen at Williams, especially now that they have a substitute that is working tirelessly at Mercedes in order to bring the car where it belongs, on top of the podium scale. Williams have shown that with the right personnel, immense growth is possible, as they're very likely to finish 7th in the Constructors' Championship and bring home an increased amount of prize money from the F1's money cake. While this would definitely help them with the outdated infrastructure, as Vowles called it, with which they struggle a lot, their goal wouldn't end here, as they're looking forward to putting a second competitive driver alongside Albon that would be able to not just score points, but also make the tie feel threatened and up his game in order to push the team closer to the midfield. As of now, Williams, or more precisely Albon, have scored 21 points and are keeping tight in the position they're in, but only because Alfa Romeo, AlphaTauri and Haas have been so inconsistent this year, and truth be told, this is definitely not a scenario that Williams can bet on in the foreseeable future. It's never a good thing when you have only one driver scoring all of the points, and the other one is genuinely the second fiddle, even though Sargeant's performance has improved from his first couple of races. Still, he hasn't scored points, and the scarier part for him is that he isn't showing any signs that this will be completed in the remainder of the season or in the times to come. James Vowles has spoken about the struggles that Sargeant has, and on top of that, he's also added what the American needs to do in order to save his F1 career, which was already at a huge question mark before its beginning, considering the fact that he finished 4th in last year's F2 season and didn't even have the super license points until the last race in Abu Dhabi came to an end. When talking about this matter, Vowles said, "It's ultimately, Formula 1 is the pinnacle of motorsport. It's a fierce competition. It's a meritocracy. You have to earn your place here. He has to keep developing and moving forward. It needs improvements on consistency, which I've said through the season. The gap to Alex needs to remain the same and shrink over time. If we take a step back, we've put Logan in a situation where he came straight out of F2, had a day and a half of testing. Well, good luck, you're a Formula 1 driver." Furthermore, Vowles went on to say that people seem to underestimate the pressure that Sargeant has been put under, but he's also added that if the rate of learning is not increasing in the upcoming period and they don't see any signs of improvement, then they'll be forced to look for a backup. I don't know what is actually going on behind closed curtains, but the reality is loud and clear. Sargeant has 0 points in 2023 and is the only driver to have driven all of the races and achieved this feature, while his teammate has 21 points and is comfortably keeping the team at P7. I'm not saying that with Sargeant performing on Albon's level, they would have had a shot at P6, because this is Alpine we're talking about and they're constantly in the midfield, but if anything, they would have had solid ground to work on for the upcoming seasons. With this in mind, it seems like Williams might be looking in another direction when it comes to that second driver spot. And whenever this question pops up, Mick Schumacher is probably peeking from somewhere and is asking the sweet question, does anybody need a driver? Mick has been doing relentless work back in Mercedes as a reserve driver and has been constantly praised by Wolff, Hamilton and Russell for his efforts to bring the W14 where it needs to be. And so far, that seems to have granted him a lot of popularity and momentum, which, considering the fact that Vowles was the chief of strategy at Mercedes 1 year ago, could very well play in his own favour. We can never throw away the opportunity that Toto Wolff would be constantly making calls about his reserve driver getting a starting seat in 2024. And if you don't believe us, he is the one that confirmed that teams are missing out on a lot by not picking Mick as their starting driver for the upcoming campaign. And his sole mission would be to put the German in this position as soon as possible. Wolff has spoken about his impact on Mick's career and how he's trying to influence the other teams to pick him as the starting driver in 2024, Williams included, as the Austrian went on to say, "I'm not even sure that we can facilitate a seat because every time we speak highly of him, somebody feels to say something negative. Whenever I can speak highly and praise Mick, that's what I'm doing. But at the end, it's every team's authority to decide on their drivers, and I very much respect that. Our contracts with the teams were never, you have to take our junior driver, you have to take our reserve driver, because when I was at Williams, I also wanted to have my own choice." This would have been going heavily in Sargeant's favour had he started to deliver the results that everybody asked for from him. But as of now, this doesn't seem to be happening, which is only opening up the door for Mick and Williams more and more. A renowned F1 correspondent, Lawrence Barretto, is strongly convinced that the UK-based team is already looking for a replacement for Sargeant, especially after the strong form that's been displayed by Albon. When talking about this matter, Barretto went on to say, "The British team, who sit 7th in the standings, already have highly rated Alex Albon tied up for 2024. On the other side of the garage, rookie Logan Sargeant has had a solid but unspectacular start to life in Formula 1 and knows he needs to up his game to stick around for another season." Williams have thrown their collective arm around the American's shoulders and tried to keep the pressure off him in a bid to help him find a rhythm. They're backing him to succeed and earn a second campaign in blue, but he needs to not only find consistency, but also close the gap to Albon, particularly in qualifying, and get himself on the scoreboard. If he doesn't, his seat is under threat. Mick Schumacher would be an obvious contender, having briefly had talks with the team last year and having kept his hand through his Mercedes reserve role, where he's earned public praise for his efforts from Hamilton and Russell. Well, keep in mind that it's solely Albon who's keeping the team in the position where they are right now. And while I do have high hopes that Sargeant will pick up the pace and will show what cloth he's made of, this is not the situation like it was back in 2020, when both of the cars failed to score points. His teammate is outperforming the car to the maximum point, and that just goes to show that while there is still more performance to be found from the FW45, Williams might not be the most patient team now that they have the momentum in their hands. So what do you think about Mick Schumacher replacing Sargeant? Do you think that this scenario will see the daylight? Let us know in the comments down below.